Okay, today we're going to be talking about congruent triangles. And we're going to understand congruent triangles using postulates and theorems and using inductive reasoning. So I have these three straws. The pinks are the same length, the oranges are the same length, and the blues are the same length. And we're going to put these straws together in a way, and we're going to see how they relate to each other. So I'm going to do mine first. And I'm just going to make a triangle. Now, while I'm doing this, can you think of what might happen with your triangle?
If the blue straws are the same length as that blue straw, and this is the same as that orange, and the pink is the same as the pink, then if the sides are going to be congruent, then that means the angles are going to produce congruent angles.
All right, well, let's see. I'm going to measure mine, and then you can measure yours. So between the orange and the blue, it looks like 40. Between the pink and the orange looks like 89-ish. And between the blue and the pink looks like 55. So let's see if your numbers come out about like mine.
Okay, so the measure of the angle between the pink and the orange is 90 degrees, like yours. The measure between the orange and the blue is 40, which is like yours. And the measure between the pink and the blue is about 59 or 60, which is also like yours. So because the straws were the same lengths, it produced the same angles.
Exactly. So can you think of a way that we could rearrange the sides of this triangle and get different angles? Like maybe try putting pink on the other side of the blue.
I think no matter which way we rearrange them, the angles between the triangles will still be the same, because the only thing we're working with are the exact same sides.
Right. So this brings us to a theorem called side, side, side. And it says that if two triangles have all the same side lengths, that means they are congruent. And we can see that because all their side lengths are the same and their angles are the same. Okay, now that we've finished part one of our lesson, side, 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 we're going to move on to part two, and we're going to talk about a congruence theorem using scissors and a ruler. So we have these two triangles, and when I lay them on top of each other, what can you tell me about them?
We can see that they overlay perfectly on top of one another, so that means these angles are congruent, these angles are congruent, and these angles are congruent,
Right.
as well as the sides.
Okay, so we're going to use, I have these two angles marked, these two congruent angles, you told me they're congruent, and we're going to take our orange and our blue sides, one of each, and we're going to make part of a triangle with these parts that we have.
Okay.
So that means two sides and one angle, with the angle being in between the sides. So how many triangles do you think will come out of here? I mean, can we lay them differently and get 5 triangles, or?
Well, we already know that these sides will be congruent and these sides will be congruent. And based off the explanation of the papers overlaying on top of each other, we know the angles are congruent. Therefore, we're only going to be getting these angles.
Right, okay, so we're going to try to prove this using the theorem we've already proved. We're going to try to prove that these two triangles are congruent. So what do we need to make these two triangles congruent using our last theorem?
Our last theorem was side, 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 so we have to measure what we don't have.
Right, we're going to find the length of the other side, which mine is a little less than 2, and yours is?
Mine is a little less than 2 inches as well.
All right. So, what do you think that this tells us? What's our big word of the day?
We had side, side, side as part 1, so now we have side, angle, side, proving the triangles are congruent.
Right, we got another theorem. We said that if we have two sides with an angle in between them that are congruent, and those two sides are congruent, we can prove using side, side, side that the triangles are congruent.
Oh, okay.
So, let's see. What do you think would happen if you used the pink one instead of the blue ones?
If we took the blue ones away and we inserted the pink ones instead, we still would have congruent triangles because these sides are still congruent, these sides are still congruent, and the angles are still congruent. We don't need that other side for right now. We have side, angle, side.
Perfect. Okay, now we've proven our second part of our lesson. And now we're going to talk about the third part, and for this one, we're going to use two angles and one side. So, these two angles are from our last part, and we've already proven that they're congruent.
Okay.
We're going to use two other ones, and like the same way that we did last time, we can lay them on top of each other and show that they're the same. Or, if you don't have that option to actually pick it up and look at them, we're going to see that they're congruent by measuring them. So I'm going to take this one, and we're going to find that it is 90 degrees. We're going to look at this one and find that it is also 90 degrees.
Okay.
So we have two congruent angles. Now we're going to take our blue straws, which we know are also congruent to each other, and we're going to put the angles on each side of these straws, this straw. Yeah.
And so now we know that the angles are congruent, and we've already established that the blue straws are congruent.
Right.
Okay.
So now to make our triangle, we need two more sides. And we're going to use these angles to draw the other sides. So it has to be this angle and this side. So our only line possible is this one right here.
Okay.
And you can just draw it all the way to the end of the paper.
Okay.
And now, using this angle and this side, we get our third side of the triangle. Now we're going to do this for our other triangle. Using this angle and this side, there's only one side possible. Okay, now we're going to complete our side triangle with the third side. And it is going to go with that side, and this angle puts it right here. All right. So now we can see that our third angle comes right here and comes right here. So now we have two triangles with this side congruent, these angles congruent, and these angles congruent. Now we're going to try to use side, angle, side to prove that the triangles are congruent. So if I measure this side, I get about 2.5. And then if I measure this side,
Why aren't we measuring this side?
we're going to measure this side over here because with the blue side and the bigger angle, that's the side we want to measure.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we're going to measure this side, which is about 2.5, and therefore we have a congruent side, a congruent angle, and another congruent side. And what does that sound like?
The previous part of our lesson, side, angle, side, proving that these two triangles are congruent.
Exactly, so we started with a congruent angle, a congruent side, and a congruent angle. And the only triangle that we could make out of this gave us two congruent triangles.
And these are the only triangles that we can make because these angles are congruent and the sides are congruent.
Exactly.
They can't be manipulated any other way.
Right. Okay, so we just finished part 3 of our lesson on congruent triangles, and we proved that if you have two congruent angles, two congruent sides, and two more congruent angles, you get congruent triangles. Before we conclude this Van Heel Level 2 lesson, we're going to talk about the difference between a theorem and a postulate. We've been calling these theorems because we're in Level 2. They are actually postulates because they haven't been formally proven, but it's okay in our informal proofs to call them theorems in Level 2.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.